Are you willing to accept Christ's invitation to know Him more intimately, love Him more intensely, and follow Him more closely, and then go out into the world and live His good news? If you say yes, then you could be the 13th apostle. Join Dan Duddy and Tom Caffrey, the odd couple of Catholic radio, as they ride the radio waves 2 by 2 to share the goodness, beauty, and truth of Jesus Christ and His church. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the 13th apostle.
The last 2 episodes, we being Danny and me, we have had the great pleasure of, taking advantage of an offer by Providence to stumble or be led into a new friendship, with a man who's got great stories to tell. I think we all do. I think all people have great stories to tell, but some are more interesting than others, or most people just don't get to tell it and are not heard about their story. And that's the beautiful thing of taking a step forward. You already know about Danny's and my history together and how we got started. Now we have a new friend in Dennis Murphy.
Amen.
So we've had 2 episodes, talked about his experience growing up in Philadelphia, in the Philadelphia area, a Catholic family. I don't have to tell you, right? I don't have to tell you what the ethnicity is or anything like that. Murphy, everybody listening, Murphy. And then his experience, which really wanted to get to, and the purpose of this conversation, this long form conversation of his experience in military combat when he served in Vietnam in the war over there, and then coming home, and then the experience coming home, and then years later, this run-in he had with this student while he was working at a college, a student whose father was in the North Vietnamese army, and they probably fought very close to each other, and they had I guess we could call it a rapprochement. And believe it or not, they had an exchange of each other's uniforms. At one time, certainly was unthinkable. And these are the experiences, the stories that we hear that inspire us, that what you think is won't always be. And it can be something else, or something else can come out of it. And that's how Dennis has blessed us with his experience. This is Tom Caffrey, with my partner, Dan Duddy, and we say welcome back to the 13th Apostle, where we explore the good, beautiful, and true of the Catholic faith and the Catholic Church. Danny, what's up?
Everything's great, Tommy. I'm looking forward to moving along and pulling Dennis forward and put that pot back on the stove, turn it on low, and let's let it fill the air again, because there's really good stuff in there. He's a pot of beautiful, beautiful stew of many stories under one lid. It's I guess I must be hungry or something. I don't know why, but
This is beautiful.
yeah, let's light that up and let's go. Take it, Tom. Take us where you want to go with this to start us off, so we can let our audience get refreshed and smell that air again of that beautiful stew. And let's get after some conversation.
Yeah, so we're going to get into maybe something a little bit more the political, mostly religious, sociological. Dennis gave us some ideas of the experiences of what he faced when he came back, and I think a lot of us know the stories of when Vietnam veterans came back to the States. They weren't given a hero's welcome, let's put it that way. But you know what? I've said it many times. You can't call yourself a hero. Somebody else has to call you a hero. And eventually, if you're living a good life, if your heart is in the right place, you're going to be a hero to somebody. So, Dennis Murphy, a hero to Dan and me, maybe perhaps not for the reasons you think. Welcome back to the 13th Apostle.
Well, thank you very much, Tom and Dan. You talked about the Holy Spirit, and I'm sitting here at the desk, and I've been looking for a hearing aid for weeks, and it just popped up as you guys came on. I now remember putting it here, and the Holy Spirit led me to this very expensive hearing aid. And now I have another one, but I'm charging it up, and I was just feeling really stupid. So I think there's no such thing as a coincidence. And how about that?
Mm.
Now, I really appreciate both of you guys are fabulous people, and I really appreciate your interest in me. But it's not me; it's the era, it's the veterans, it's the war, it's everything that happened during that period of time. I'm representing my fellow brothers and sisters, and we talked a little bit about, I think, the nursing story,
Right.
the women, and there were women there, not many, but they were critical to us. So I guess if you look at two things that I learned in the last 2 weeks that I have to thank you for, and I never would have thought of this before. I knew it, but I didn't think of it. There's a difference. And I said that I'm most proud of something I didn't do. I don't know if you
Right.
remember that.
Yes, indeed.
And that was not following an order, an illegal order, but an order. It was an order to remove 3 prisoners that I had wounded and captured. And I've always been proud of it, knowing that I did the right thing. There's no question. But I could easily have done the wrong thing. And I guess I look back on why did I do the right thing at that moment? And someone else possibly would have been weak and maybe possibly done that. And I know it happened. I've talked to some people that did things that I would not ever want anyone to even know about, let alone think that the American Army might do. Whether they actually did or not, I don't know. But we have to, when you put on a uniform, I always believe that you have to be better than anybody else. Police officer, a teacher, whatever it might be, any type of person that is given responsibility. And you have allowed me to resurrect that positive feeling about the fact that that really probably was the best thing I did over there, was not to follow an order. So I thank you for that. But the fact that I didn't do it, internally, we all know what's right and wrong. I don't think anyone, as a matter of fact, I'm with my grandkids, 6-year-olds today, and one of the kids tossed apparently a pumpkin at the street or something, and they came running back because they knew this kid did something wrong. They didn't want to be part of it and came back and told me. So internally, we know what's right and wrong. When we do wrong, it's something that comes out of the left field that I think people are trying to find a meaning in life to do something like that. And certainly the My Lai massacre, which was not far from where I was located, haunted me. Just the fact that it was my unit, not my division, not my actual unit, that did that. And I just don't know how anybody could do it. I do not how. And all
Now,
these
just
atrocities.
for the sake of our audience, Dennis,
Sure.
in a brief summary of what happened.
In 68, Lieutenant Calley and Captain Medina, they landed in an area where they were getting hammered with booby traps. There were no enemy to be found. They believed the locals were doing it, and they might have done that. Well, they went into a village that was supposedly somebody fired on them. They went into the village, and they just lit up everybody in the village. They killed several hundred civilians, including children. If you look at Life magazine articles, there's pictures of the folks, and it's just a horrible thing. And I never saw anything like that. But the fact that it happened, it was a real stain on America, and also on my division, which they changed from Americal to 23rd Infantry after that. The Americal word is no longer to be found easily. Always doing the right thing. Because going over to Vietnam, given a rifle with a grenade launcher and 200 rounds and 50 grenades and a Claymore mine that could blow out a house, you got a little bit of responsibility there. And I never took any of that lightly. So the possibility of shooting my own person, my own soldier, which could have happened easily. Fortunately, we were in an area that anything moved, you were able to shoot it, which sounds horrible, but that's what the reality was. They got all the civilians out of this area. That doesn't mean there weren't civilians there. We did find some papa signs and mama signs that were there, some old folks, and certainly we didn't bother them. But to be in an area where anything moves, you could shoot, and mentally that takes a toll on you. But the real toll was the possibility that somebody else out there was going to take a pot shot at you. So you're literally on edge all the time. And my Catholic faith gave me the strength to go daily. I wear that St. Christopher medal that my mother gave me, that unfortunately I lost in the hospital in Japan. I felt horrible about that. And I always knew that I was going to come home and I could look my parents in the face and say, I did my duty. Someone not doing the right thing, it must be tough in life to live with that. Even if you get forgiven, somebody gives you forgiveness, it's not gonna be the same. I don't know if that makes any sense, but thank you for allowing me to go back in time and recognize that, yeah, that probably was the best thing I ever did, was not do that order. That would have ruined my life.
Dennis,
Yes.
my father, God bless his soul, was a World War II veteran. And when the Vietnam War entered into history, my father had a real problem with the horrors of the war by way of the tactics of the war. And in my father's own Archie Bunker way, which I can't say on radio, he would often talk about how much he hated the type of enemy that you were battling, in guerrilla warfare, hit and run types of battles, mixing in with civilians at the expense of the civilians, strapping hand grenades perhaps to young boys who our American soldiers might help to get up onto a half track or something, and then blowing up the half track. It's something that my father just could not stomach. But here you are, many years down the road, having an intimate friendship with perhaps an example of the Viet Cong, who was perhaps maybe the greatest, even to this point, most intimate enemy that we have had, before, seeing the whites of people's eyes, not that far back. That intimate relationship, whereas it's really man versus man and, taking, bayonets and being as close as you were. You described the battles where you were hit and how close these bullets, where they were coming from, were so close to you. Did that lead to a more intimate relationship with, what was the man's name? What is the man's name? Could you pronounce that for me that you...
Well, his last name was Nguyen. He was Nguyen. His daughter was Fung Nguyen.
Okay.
She was my student. And again, when I met her in the school, and I told you earlier, I was with lots and lots of South Vietnamese. I've been blessed with, I'm going to get together with a bunch of students from years ago that couldn't speak any English and now are very successful, probably with kids in medical school in the near future. So I was blessed to be exposed to people I could help. I think internally, what I could been searching all my life is for people I can help. Who can I help? And we get so much more back when we help. So all of a sudden, these Vietnamese showed up, and consequently, I almost felt like a calling that God was asking me to help them because no one else was prepared at that moment. So fast forward years later, and the Vietnamese are all in, and everybody's good. And this woman shows up, and I find out she's a North Vietnamese resident of Hanoi, and her father was in the North Vietnamese Army. My back went up. I must admit, I'm like, oh boy, what am I going to do now? How am I going to manage this? How is my God going to help me do the right thing? Just like he made sure I didn't do the wrong thing in Vietnam, I have to be welcoming to this person, to this young lady who we became dear friends.
So did you pray? How am I going to love my enemy?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Because, I mean, like I said, the last time I saw those folks were 6 and 8 feet away, and they were blasting away, and they got the better of me that day, unfortunately. And they hurt a lot of friends. I think I mentioned, we lost numerous folks. After I was wounded, our base was overrun. We lost 33 guys. And that would have been that unit that he was in, that relatively larger group. He was part of that. And I didn't know that then, but I knew it later on. So it really was my enemy. And again, God says, love your enemies. Turn the other cheek. That doesn't mean get hit in the other cheek, but it means take another look at something. Take a second, look back and say, how can I deal with this in a different way? And you mentioned Archie Bunker, and my dad had a bit of a characteristics like that. And I think if you haven't heard about Archie Bunker, he was a character that allowed us to look at some of our faults and realize what they were and change them. I think he was a major player in many of my generation looking at life differently. So anyway, that was a major thing. And when I met him, and he gave me his uniform, and we got hugs and walking arm in arm, never would have thought that would have happened. Now that happened in World War II, but we won those wars. We beat the Japanese and the Germans. The Korean War is a different story, but Vietnam, we lost. And my grandkids, they're 6 years old now, and was in the Army, and The other day, my one granddaughter said, "Well, you won the war." I said, "No, we didn't win the war." She looked at me almost like I wasn't quite the grandfather that she thought I was. Nobody likes to lose. But in many ways, I think we learned from that lesson that you can't get involved in things you can't win. And unfortunately, the first Persian Gulf War was fought by the captains and lieutenants that were now generals and colonels in the first Persian Gulf War. We knew how to win a war. We sent over sufficient people. The rules of engagement were clear. And then once the war was over, we left. I would argue that the captains and the lieutenants that were part of that saw how easy it was. And I'm not saying we lost 130 people and a lot of civilians. So I'm not saying it was easy, but from a military standpoint, it was relatively easy. The Iraq and Afghanistan war, we were not prepared. We thought we'd win and it would be a cakewalk, just like we thought Vietnam would be. And look what happened. My nephew spent almost 20 years over there, flying Apaches back and forth, back and forth. I had students, many students, a number of students, a couple one in particular that lost their legs and were injured permanently. And you have to say, for who, for what, And
Yeah. So did we learn a lesson? You said we learned a lesson, but then
learned
we
a lesson for the
years.
first Persian Gulf War, but then we forgot because the people that were the young guys, or so to speak, and women, they thought this is how wars fought, so we can do it again. And the Colin Powells, which I'm proud to say I was in his division, I didn't know, of course, they changed the dynamics of the first Persian Gulf War to make sure we do it right and important to get out. And if you notice, when in Iraq, Afghanistan, we never got out of there until they ran us out of there. And that's another thing. I don't think I said this, but I was a senior. I just had my 50th graduation anniversary from Westchester University. And I remember April of 75, and I was a senior. I had gone back to school, and I'm watching the fall of Saigon on CBS News. Walter Cronkite, who we all admired, many of us admired at the time. And I must admit, I sat there, and my friends weren't in the apartment for some reason. They weren't there. I don't know why. And I was there all by myself, and I must admit, I drank way too many beers and cried the whole night as I saw the country fall apart. And I knew how much skin in the game that we had. Not just me, I was minor compared to a lot of other people. And I thought, how could this ever happen? And unfortunately, it happened again. In Afghanistan. And it's just hard to believe that we keep making these mistakes. Jefferson, when our country began as a nation, we didn't have a Navy, but a continental Navy, which was put together in a different way. It wasn't a formal Navy. He didn't want a Navy because the British had a Navy and they used the Navy. They used it incorrectly, in his opinion. And we have a military. We have to make sure whatever we do it right because we have a responsibility. How many civilians have died in Iraq, Afghanistan? It's 1 million, 2 million. It's a crazy number. Our numbers of deaths and injury are pale in comparison. But we do have a responsibility. And I watched the Band of Brothers and the Pacific, which both of them are outstanding. And then there's a new program that came out last year or so called Masters of the Air. And Masters of the Air talks about the bombing campaign in Europe. And we killed a lot of civilian Germans to win the war. I just think about that. I just have to think that we got to do it differently going forward. And I know prayers are the greatest thing in the world. They're not always going to work the first time. And some people don't want to hear our prayers.
And I think you said, Dennis, before a moment ago, to do it right. And I got my interpretation with that was to do it correct.
Right, exactly.
You said right. And so what I'm thinking is the moral right. And the Catholic response certainly to Vietnam, the clergy, the most famous, and to some people, maybe even to you, the most infamous, were the Berrigan brothers,
yes.
Daniel and Philip. And they were totally and vigorously opposed to the war in Vietnam, or to our participation in the war in Vietnam, because it was a war between the North and the South, and we got involved on behalf of the South. So two things come to mind. When you're a faithful Catholic and you see the war one way, you have other, we'll call them faithful Catholics. There's a whole group of them who say, no, this is the wrong way. This is not what Jesus would do. In the halls of the church and in the halls of government where there are Catholics, there are Christians, but it's not just them, where they're wrestling over and they're arguing in near fistfights over the just war theory. Is this a just war that we are committing our sons and a few daughters, and I say a few in terms of Vietnam, sons and daughters to, and all the, our treasure, is it meeting the criteria? And can we say, look at the massive casualties, the massive loss of life in the bombings in Tokyo, and that's separate from the Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and then the bombings of Dresden. All it's a massive loss of life, massive destruction, and I don't think there's ever going to be someone to say, yeah, this is absolute. This war was just, or what we're thinking about doing. Yes, we've decided it's going to be just, and we're going to go in.
Well, Vietnam, we had a treaty. It was called the SEATO Treaty, just like the NATO Treaty, Southeast Pacific Treaty Organization. And if a country was attacked, we had to jump in and defend them. And the North Vietnamese attacked a sovereign nation, and that was our duty. I think I mentioned before, there were Australians there. The South Koreans were probably the best soldiers over there, even maybe better than North Vietnamese. Philippines, I think, sent troops. There are 4 or 5 other countries that sent troops. So I guess the first thing is we got to make sure our alliances are correct. And I mean, what if Poland is attacked by the Russians? Do we help them? Do we send our treasure there? The problem is we answer those questions after the fact and not before the fact. So we have to know that if this happens, we're sending our people to Poland. And my nephew, I believe, is on his way to Poland. He's a West Pointer, recently passed Ranger School, and the son of my nephew was the Apache pilot in Afghanistan and Iraq, and was away forever. So we do have a war that could break out if a missile lands in Luxembourg by accident. Do we go to war with that? So our politicians have to be honest and fair and transparent, and let us know what's going on. And that's asking a lot of people that maybe aren't used to doing that.
Dan, you want to say something?
Dennis, this is a really human story, and in my notes too, I wanted to reflect upon the justified war versus the unjustified war, and I have to tell you that the irony of you being a soldier in this really like vicious eye-to-eye type war, when you exude virtue of purity, and there's innocence and humanity in you. And to hear you talk, here in this 3rd episode, I see the justification of the war in your very own soul. There's something good about the horrors of the war. It's the triumph and the tragedy of our crucifix. I do want to go back to episode 1 time. You mentioned going to Mass in episode 1 and how great it was to find harbor in that Mass while you were overseas. And I want to reflect on what was it that gave you such warmth there, because it really warmed me, because you're such a great storyteller. You took the coldness of the battles of the war, and then you talked about us, about you going to Mass. And
the church is a sanctuary. It's a true sanctuary. People ask me about the Catholicism, why you build these beautiful churches. Well, majesty and beauty is part of our religion, in my opinion. This church, and I have a picture of it, as a matter of fact, and somewhere here. It's not much of a church, but it was a church, and it was a sanctuary. Walking in there, knowing that you could put away the ills of the world, and for an hour or two be with my God. And on the most important eve of the year, and here I am, basically an E4, E3, whatever I was, and I had that opportunity. And my whole life has been one opportunity after another. This is a great opportunity, meeting both of you and having this chance to chat. I've been just blessed from my family to my good fortune in Vietnam, getting out of there, to my wife of 50 years now, and my 3 beautiful children and 6 grandchildren. I've just been blessed left and right. And that moment to be in church and to hear the singing and have communion, the Eucharist, when I had nothing, I had none of it for months. was just something that's hard to explain.
You too are a song, Dennis. You are singing a song. You need to keep singing it, brother. It's a beautiful song.
Well,
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I can't thank both of you enough for this. I'm looking forward to then meeting you directly when you come down and buy some tickets at Cape May.
He's selling us raffle tickets, Tom. We did 3 episodes for us to buy a ticket.
And just accept the fact it's going to be a donation because it's all rigged.
Well, it looks like all the North Jersey people win the ticket, win the car. So
Tom, nobody ever wins that car. It's a car for 5 years. I put a scratch on one of those cars, just a little mark. You know? It was the same car every year.
Oh gosh, what I thought about real quickly was when you talked about going into the sanctuary of that little church in the theater, right?
Right.
It made me think of the Christmas piece in World War I.
Yes.
And
awesome.
A soccer match, and
yeah.
But that happened. That happened right after the war began.
We gotta wrap this up. But that difference there, you got Christian against Christian, and you didn't have that.
Right.
Not always, certainly against the North Vietnamese. So
right.
It's all sorts of angles. We're out of time. We can't look at any more of these angles, but not now anyway.
We'll
but I'm sure we will.
Back. Yep. Yeah.
Dennis Murphy, a real treat.
God bless you.
God bless you, brother.
Right.
Thank you.
Danny?
Yep. Stay tuned, folks, for the Angelus and your prayer intentions with Peter and Jemmy.
WQPH Radio, Queen of Perpetual Help. As always, that's why it's perpetual. Go to the mother. Go to the mother. We thank the radio station for all the support. And you, ladies and gentlemen, God bless you, Dennis. God bless you, Danny.
God bless you, Tommy and Dennis, and God bless you all.
God bless. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the 13th Apostle with Dan Duddy and Tom Caffrey. For more information on Dan, visit his website at www.danduddy.com or email dcduddy@gmail.com. Tom's website is faithpilgrims.com or email trcaffrey@faithpilgrims.com. How about you? Will you be the 13th Apostle?